Who lives longer, thin people or overweight people? The scientific answer may surprise you. If you asked 100 people on the street, who lives longer, thin people or overweight people, most would probably answer immediately that thin people live longer. At first glance, that seems completely logical. We constantly hear that obesity increases the risk of heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, and many other serious health conditions. Meanwhile, being thin is often associated with agility, good health, and longevity, but modern science tells a much more complicated story. In fact, several large-scale studies involving millions of people have revealed something that has puzzled researchers for years. People who are slightly overweight sometimes have higher survival rates than those who are underweight, and in some cases even higher than those considered to have a normal weight. So who really lives longer? Thin people? Overweight people? Or is the answer somewhere in between? Let's take a closer look at what science actually says. First, we need to understand that body weight is only one small part of the overall health picture. Two people can weigh exactly the same amount and have completely different levels of health. One person may have strong muscles, exercise regularly, and eat a balanced diet. The other may carry excessive visceral fat, rarely exercise, and suffer from metabolic problems. Even though the scale shows the same number, their risks of disease and premature death can be dramatically different. That is why scientists do not rely solely on body weight when studying longevity. However, for large population studies, researchers often use a measurement called body mass index, or BMI. BMI is calculated by dividing weight by height squared. According to standard classifications, a BMI below 18.5 is considered underweight. A BMI between 18.5 and 24.9 is considered normal. A BMI between 25 and 29.9 is considered overweight. A BMI of 30 or higher is considered obese. Based on common assumptions, many people would expect the risk of death to increase steadily as BMI rises. But when researchers analyzed real-world data, the results were far more surprising. One of the most influential studies, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, examined data from nearly 3 million individuals. The findings shocked many experts. The group with the lowest mortality rate was not the thinnest group. In fact, people classified as slightly overweight had about a 6% lower risk of death compared to those in the normal BMI category. This unexpected observation became known as the obesity paradox. It led scientists to ask an important question. Could carrying a small amount of extra weight actually provide certain health advantages? To understand this possibility, we need to examine how the human body responds to illness. When we are young and healthy, we rarely think about our body's energy reserves. But during serious illness, especially later in life, those reserves can become extremely important. Imagine a 5-year-old individual hospitalized with severe pneumonia. The body must use enormous amounts of energy to fight the infection. The person may eat very little for days or even weeks. In this situation, stored body fat and muscle become valuable resources that help support survival and recovery. People who are extremely thin often have fewer reserves available. They may lose muscle more rapidly, become malnourished more easily, and struggle to recover from illness. This is one reason why doctors often become concerned when older adults lose weight unexpectedly. In fact, unintended weight loss in older adults is frequently considered a warning sign of serious underlying health issues. Numerous studies have shown that older individuals who are underweight often face a significantly higher risk of death compared with those who maintain a moderate body weight. However, this does not mean that gaining excessive weight is beneficial. Once body fat reaches high levels, particularly visceral fat, the negative consequences begin to outweigh any potential advantages. This brings us to an important distinction between subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat is located directly beneath the skin. While excessive amounts are not ideal, this type of fat is generally less harmful. Visceral fat, on the other hand, surrounds vital organs such as the liver, pancreas, and intestines. Today, scientists view visceral fat as a highly active tissue that contributes to chronic inflammation throughout the body. It continuously releases inflammatory chemicals into the bloodstream. Over time, this persistent inflammation damages blood vessels, accelerates atherosclerosis, and increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. Visceral fat also interferes with insulin sensitivity. As a result, it contributes to insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes. In other words, not all body fat is equally dangerous. Two people may weigh exactly the same, yet one may face substantially greater health risks depending on where fat is stored. A person with a large waistline and significant abdominal fat typically has a higher risk of disease than someone whose fat is distributed more evenly throughout the body. That is why many health experts now recommend paying attention not only to body weight, but also to waist circumference. For many Asian populations, a healthy waist circumference is generally considered below 90 centimeters for men and below 80 centimeters for women. Exceeding these limits is associated with a significantly greater risk of metabolic disease. Another factor that is often overlooked is muscle mass. Many people assume that longevity depends mainly on body fat. In reality, muscle may be even more important. Muscle does far more than help us move. It acts as a metabolic organ. It helps regulate blood sugar. It supports mobility and balance. It reduces the risk of falls. It protects bone health. As we age, muscle mass naturally declines. After the age of 50, adults may lose between 5 and 10% of their muscle mass each decade if they do not engage in regular strength training. This condition is known as sarcopenia, or age-related muscle loss. It is one of the primary reasons older adults become frail and dependent on others. Research consistently shows that low muscle mass is strongly associated with a higher risk of death. In many cases, it is a better predictor of health outcomes than body weight alone. This means that a slightly overweight person with strong muscles may be far healthier than a very thin person with little muscle and poor physical function. This also explains why many athletes have BMIs that place them in the overweight category while remaining exceptionally healthy. BMI cannot distinguish between muscle and fat. That is one of its biggest limitations. Another common question is whether thin people automatically have lower risks of heart disease. The answer is not necessarily. Many individuals who appear slim actually carry excessive amounts of visceral fat. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to as TOFI, which stands for thin outside, fat inside. These individuals may look healthy on the outside but can still have fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, insulin resistance, and elevated cardiovascular risk. This explains why some thin people develop diabetes, heart disease, or stroke despite having a normal body weight. Physical appearance does not always reflect what is happening inside the body. At the same time, some overweight individuals maintain normal blood pressure, healthy cholesterol levels, and stable blood sugar. Researchers once described this condition as metabolically healthy obesity. However, long-term studies suggest that many of these individuals eventually develop higher risks of cardiovascular disease if excess weight persists for many years. Therefore, obesity should never be viewed as harmless. The key lesson from modern research is that health is far more complex than a number on a scale. If scientists plot BMI against mortality risk, they often observe a U-shaped curve. At one end are individuals who are underweight. At the other end are those who are obese. Both groups experience elevated risks of death. The lowest risk is typically found somewhere in the middle. For many adults, this range often corresponds to a BMI between approximately 22 and 27. Interestingly, among older adults, maintaining a BMI slightly above the traditional normal range may sometimes offer protective benefits. This is likely because older individuals require greater energy reserves to withstand illness and physical stress. Yet the most important factor is not BMI itself. What matters most is body composition and overall health. Do you have adequate muscle mass? Do you exercise regularly? Do you carry excessive visceral fat? Are your blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol levels under control? A person who exercises consistently, sleeps well, and follows a balanced diet will often outlive someone who focuses solely on achieving a lower body weight. In fact, numerous studies have found that cardiovascular fitness is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. In other words, your ability to walk briskly, climb stairs, stay active, and maintain physical endurance may be more important than losing a few extra pounds. So who lives longer, thin people or overweight people? According to current scientific evidence, the answer is neither extreme. The longest-lived individuals are typically neither very thin nor severely overweight. They maintain a healthy balance, they preserve muscle mass, they minimize visceral fat, they eat nutritious foods. They remain physically active, they sleep adequately, and they maintain healthy metabolic function throughout life. If your goal is to live longer, stop focusing solely on becoming thinner. Instead, focus on building a healthier body. A body that can walk long distances without exhaustion. A body that can climb stairs with ease. A body with stable blood pressure, healthy blood sugar levels, strong muscles, and the ability to remain independent well into old age. That is the true goal. Because in the end, the secret to longevity is not whether you are thin or overweight. The real question is how healthy your body is every single day. And that is something modern science continues to confirm more clearly than ever before.